Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Forum Daily West. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. The newly sworn-in president says tariffs likely to begin February 1st, while Trudeau says Canada retaliates with a dollar-for-dollar tariff. Plus, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says Parliament needs to get back to work. Toronto Sun's Brian Lilley explains. And an expedited hearing motion granted on the legal challenge of proroguing Parliament. Thanks so much for joining us. Although it appeared Canada might get a slight reprieve from Trump's tariffs on Inauguration Day, during his signing of his many executive orders Monday, Trump told reporters he's ordered a study of the U.S.'s trade relationship with Canada, and the tariffs would likely begin on February 1st. In response, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says if Trump wants to usher in a, quote, golden age for the United States, it will require more energy, critical minerals, and resources that Canada is ready to provide. Speaking at the cabinet retreat in Montebello, Quebec today, Trudeau said Ottawa is willing to match dollar for dollar with tariffs if Trump makes good on his threat to impose them in February.
We heard the president's comments yesterday and the directive he has issued to examine the trade relationship between Canada and the United States while exploring the possibility of tariffs. But we remain confident in the facts. Canadian energy powers American manufacturing, businesses, and homes. Of America's top 5 trading partners, Canada is the only one with whom the United States runs a trade surplus in manufacturing. And Canada buys more goods made by Americans than China, Japan, and Germany combined. On top of that, President Trump said that he wants to usher in a golden age for the United States. That will require more steel and aluminum, more critical minerals, more reliable and affordable energy, more of everything to run the U.S. economy full steam ahead. Canada has all those resources. The alternative for them would be more resources from Russia, China, or Venezuela.
As Trudeau gave his plans in dealing with Trump's tariff threats, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre issued a statement calling for Trudeau to recall Parliament. Brian Lilley, political columnist for the Toronto Sun, explains.
And he points out that, hey, the government's announced a more than $1 billion border package. That hasn't been voted on by Parliament. It needs a vote in Parliament. Before you can act, we need to talk about retaliatory tariffs. Poilievre is saying we need to act on the border. We need to recall Parliament. We need MPs having a say in this and not just, letting. What did he say? He said the Liberals have put their party first and shut down Parliament so they can have a leadership race in the middle of this crisis.
And despite Poilievre's comments, Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc says Canada is prepared if President Trump levies 25% tariffs against Canada next month, claiming that Ottawa has a potential response scenario ready.
The premiers were in Ottawa last week. We agreed on a series of measures that we could enact if the United States government decides to do this.
Bloc Québécois leader Yves François Blanchet has a counter-argument to that of Trudeau and most premiers. He says Canada is playing with fire by suggesting it could cut oil or electricity exports to the U.S. if Trump makes good on his promise to impose tariffs. Blanchet says Canada's best response is counter-tariffs, and it would be, quote, absurd to cut energy exports. His stance aligns with that of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who stood out among premiers by ruling out cutting the U.S. off from the province's oil. And while Blanchet supports responding to U.S. tariffs with counter-tariffs, he said Canadian leaders should avoid talking about retaliation or a trade war, terms that Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly used frequently last week in Washington, as did Quebec Premier François Legault on Monday evening. Meantime, Premier Smith says Canada has a short window to highlight the trade relationship with our country and the U.S. amid President Trump's tariff threat. At a media roundtable held earlier today, she said our best approach is to focus on diplomacy and refrain from talk of retaliatory tariffs.
We think that we should be talking about addressing the trade deficit by how we might be able to have more cross-border trade in goods and services. The point I've been making is that if you take energy out of the mix, Canada actually buys more U.S. goods and services than the Americans buy from us, about $58 billion, according to a National Bank survey. We can always look at ways we can buy more, whether it's military equipment, whether it is the infrastructure for more electricity, gas turbines, transformers, or whether it's AI data center technology and other products.
The whole reason for the tariffs, of course, is Trump saying Canada needs to secure its border more into the U.S. So here are some figures on border encounters, drug seizures, and trade into America. From October 2023 to September 24, over 9,900 kilograms of fentanyl was seized at U.S. borders. Of that, 20 kilograms was seized at the U.S.-Canada border. Of the 2.9 million apprehensions and expulsions at all U.S. borders, close to 200,000 were at the Canada-U.S. border. And during this period, approximately $2.5 billion U.S. dollars of daily trade crossed the neighboring countries, and there were 8 million U.S. jobs tied to Canada trade. In other news, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom says Chief Justice Paul Crampton granted a motion for an expedited hearing in the legal challenge to the Prime Minister's decision to prorogue Parliament until March 24th. On January 6th, Trudeau announced the decision to advise the Governor General to shut down Parliament for 11 weeks. Lawyers acting on behalf of David McKinnon and Aris Lavranos of Nova Scotia filed a federal court challenge to the decision to prorogue Parliament, citing concerns about the negative impacts of that decision on democracy, the rule of law, and the ability of Parliament to respond to, quote, the grave challenge of President Trump's foreign policy. On January 18th, the justice granted a motion for an expedited hearing, citing in part that the federal court hearing the case after Parliament resumes would deprive the applicants of access to justice. That case is scheduled to be heard February 13th and 14th. Now, we've been talking so much about tariffs, proroguing Parliament, and the tongue-in-cheek argument of Canada becoming the 51st state that it's easy to forget there are other big issues on the table, such as the carbon tax. Right now, there are 3 official candidates running for leader of the Liberal Party, but where do each of them stand on the carbon tax? Well, here to weigh in is Franco Terrazzano, the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation. Franco, welcome. So what stance is each of the Liberal leadership candidates taking when it comes to Canada's controversial carbon tax?
So let's start with Mark Carney. You know, Carney is running on his expertise as a former central banker, yet his response to the most obvious question about carbon taxes provided very little clarity other than some vague suggestion that he may be working on a replacement scheme. But here's the thing, Carney will have no shreds of credibility unless he can provide a crystal clear answer on the most important question of affordability, which is, will you scrap the carbon tax? But so far, we haven't heard a clear answer from Carney.
Okay, and where do the other 2 candidates stand on this issue? Karina Gould and Chrystia Freeland.
Freeland's answer was more clear than Carney. Now, there's still some questions, but, you know, Freeland on TV said that she would be against the consumer-facing carbon tax. Her words, not mine. Now, obviously, that raises some additional questions, right? Is Freeland just against the carbon tax because it's visible, i.e. consumer facing, right? Is she just against the carbon tax because Canadians can see the huge costs of the carbon tax every time we go to the gas pumps and every time we pay our heating bills? Now, Karina Gould, Trudeau's former government House leader, she also provided some clarity. She said she would keep the carbon tax. she would just not increase it again on April 1. So apparently Gould thinks that Canadians can afford the current carbon tax, which is costing average families hundreds of dollars more every year than what they get back in rebates. Gould just wouldn't increase it again. So apparently Gould figured out that it's not smart to run a national election campaign just after the carbon tax would increase again on April 1.
All right. Well, it will be interesting to see what happens in the coming weeks with that leadership race. Thanks for your time, Franco. That was Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayer Association, joining us today from Ontario. And to the west of Lethbridge, the province awarded $32,000 to the town of Colehurst to help make two of its facilities more energy and cost efficient. The grant, which was provided through the Community Energy Conservation Program administered by the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre, was used to replace aging heating units and lighting fixtures in the Colehurst Community Centre and one of the town's public works facilities. Well, after Alberta's Minister of Transportation recently allowed the use of photo radar only on playgrounds, construction zones, and school zones, the town of Coaldale decided to repurpose their old photo radar van and put it to good use. BCN's Heidi Echeverria has the story.
We are putting an end to the misuse of photo radar as a cash cow and reinforcing its purpose solely on improving traffic safety.
With the announcement of the photo radar program ending at the beginning of 2025, we decided that we would not need the photo radar van anymore. So we decided to turn it over to the Citizens on Patrol.
Building safer communities. This is the work that a volunteer group has been doing from the Coaldale Citizens on Patrol. This group acts as extra eyes and ears for local law enforcement. The volunteers has been using their own vehicles during their patrol routes. But last week, the Coaldale Town Council approved to sell for a symbolic $1 the photo radar van to Coaldale Citizens on Patrol. The mayor of Coaldale, Jack Van Ryan, says the town of Coaldale continues to provide public safety measures and talks about the importance of repurposing the van.
We had a community peace officer vehicle that was available, and it's a marked vehicle, so it'll be positioned close to the photo radar box. So anybody it's all about public safety, so if anybody is speeding through a playground zone, if they don't notice the marked community peace officer van parked, then there's a serious concern, and if they're speeding, they deserve to get a ticket. The Citizens on Patrol, what they do for us, they're a second set of eyes and ears for the RCMP. So the town of Coaldale felt that we needed to do what we could do best for them, and that was to provide them with a vehicle.
The use of the van will be to patrol throughout Coaldale, and the volunteers that will be operating the van, they'll be looking out for any suspicious or criminal activity, and anything that they do see, the van is going to be equipped with equipment such as a video recorder, camera, night vision recorder as well. So anything that they witness, they're going to take pictures and videos of it. At the end of this patrol shift, the volunteers will do up a report, and that report will then be sent off to our liaison officer, Constable Short with the RCMP in Coaldale, and they will review that report and see if there's any need for follow-up on it. They have been trained that they do not engage in any suspicious activity that they see, or if there's an offense in progress, they will call 911.
Established in May 2023, Coaldale Citizens on Patrol already has 19 volunteers, and it is currently recruiting new members. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
Well, Lethbridge City Council rejected a motion to disband the Standing Policy Committee on a Tuesday. The SPC provides the bulk of city-run business to be discussed prior to passing on to council and allows the public to voice their concerns to the committee directly. In a 6-3 vote, council members rejected the motion. Councillor John Middleton Hope argues city council meetings would be rushed and would not provide the community an opportunity to voice concerns. And Councillor Mark Campbell says this would consolidate power onto council. City Council unanimously approved 2 other pieces of official business, including adopting the CUTA Transit Code to ensure a safer and more respectful public transit environment, and introduce an optimal balance range for the Municipal Revenue Stabilization Reserve. Lethbridge has seemed to have witnessed a bounce back in the housing starts. In 2024, the city saw a 194% increase in new units, the highest in all of Canada, according to a chart from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Lethbridge saw 715 total units built, up from just 243 from 2023, the lowest amount of housing built in the city since 1991. Elsewhere, Edmonton and Calgary saw the largest numbered increase in the country, each with around 5,000 more units built in 2024 than 2023, while other major cities in Canada, including Vancouver, Winnipeg, Toronto, and Ottawa, continued to see decreases. Overall, housing starts across the country in communities with over 10,000 residents saw a 2% increase from the previous year. That is your Forum Daily West report. I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks so much for watching.